most of them eventually transition to wanting to call us mom, usually I think because they hear the other kids call us mom. But that's a big milestone. We just had that with one of our kids today. I dropped him off at school and he pointed to me and this is a kid who normally I drop him off at school and he cannot like get me out the door fast enough, like does not want to say bye. And he pointed to me talking to his friend and said, "That's my mom."
We'll discuss race and how it plays a factor and how we didn't even talk about this topic because we were afraid.
A Black Executive Perspective.
Welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, a safe space where we discuss all matters related to race, especially race in corporate America. I'm your host, Tony Tidbit. So before we get started today, we wanted to send out a friendly reminder for you to make sure you check out our partners, Code M Magazine, whose mission is saving the Black family by first saving the Black man. So definitely go check them out at codemmagazine.com. That is codemmagazine.com. So we also want you to check out today. Today, we're going to navigate the layered and gratifying journey of adoption. I'm accompanied by three inspiring individuals, a single Black woman and a same-sex couple who are here to share their unique stories and experiences. We'll discuss the motivations behind their decisions, the challenges they face from navigating legal hurdles to overcoming societal prejudice, and how adopting a child has forever changed their worlds. So Dr. Nsenga Burton, Aubree, and Aubree Henderson, welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, my sisters.
Thank you for having us.
Hey, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for really wanting to participate and share this story. This is National Adoption Month in November, so this is very important to a Black Executive Perspective. We want to hear your perspectives on adoption, the good, the bad, and ugly, and more importantly, educate the audience on why adoption is something that they definitely should consider, because there are so many kids that are looking for love and they're looking for a home. So we definitely want to dive into it. But before we get into the heavy stuff, ladies, why don't you all go around and tell us a little bit about where you're currently residing and the makeup of your family? So we'll start with Dr. Burton first.
Hi, so I am currently living in Atlanta, Georgia. I was thinking of my home state, Atlanta, Georgia. I am the mother of an 8-year-old Kai, which I'm sure many of you who follow me know about because I talk about her a lot. I have had her since she was 6 hours old, so I adopted her. And I will say I'm an only parent. There is no dad. I am both parents.
Right.
There is no partner currently. So it's just me. And I'm not from Atlanta. So my family is elsewhere. So I really have the bulk of the care of Kai, although I have created an amazing village that helps me tremendously with her care and upbringing.
That is awesome. We want to dive into that village and your story. So I'm looking forward to hearing it. The Hendersons, Laura, Aubree, jump in here. Tell us a little bit where are you currently residing, and tell us about the makeup of your beautiful family.
Okay, cool. I'll start. I'm like looking at Laura, like, you want to go?
Who's
going to start?
Yeah.
So, hello, my name's Aubree Henderson. I'm half of this couple. My wife Laura and I live in Brooklyn, New York. And currently we have 4 kiddos in our home. We're a foster home. So we have one of our children we've adopted from foster care. And then the other 3 still currently are in care. So we have not adopted them, but we are an adoptive home. So, we always say that we are going to be the adoptive home for our kids if they're not able to be reunified with family. So currently 4 kids in our home. Our oldest is 13. We've adopted him. And then we have a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an 18-month-old.
Wow. Look at you guys. So when you jump in all the way. Huh?
That's right.
I mean, no dipping the toe in the water, right? We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it.
That's
all
right.
I love that. That is awesome. So welcome. So, Laura, I'm going to start with you here. Obviously, we don't know, the mainstream of people don't know a lot about adoption. we see things on TV of somebody carrying a baby or whatever the case may be from international, and we just don't really understand it, right? And, for you guys to come on to share, because there's a lot of things that, most people probably wouldn't want to share when it comes to what they have to go through to adopt a child, right? So the question I have for you, why did you and Aubree want to come on a Black Executive Perspective podcast to talk about this topic?
Well, thank you for the question, and thanks so much for having us. We're thrilled to be invited into this conversation because, of course, adoption is a chance to expand love in your family. And love is certainly a core value for AJ. I call Aubree AJ. For AJ and I, and as members of the queer community, we believe in chosen family, and so many folks who are queer, we have choices for how we build family. And for us, it was like, are we going to have some? Are we going to get some, to put it in crude terms? And we've, through this journey of foster care, we've learned so much. We've grown so much. And so to get to share our experience, particularly in a space that is, about a Black perspective that has a racial lens, is really meaning for us as white parents as well. So we're transracial foster and adoptive parents. Our kids do not look like us, and that has been a really meaningful, important part of our journey as well. So we're really excited to be here and talk about that.
That is awesome. Aubree, anything you wanted to add to that, or are you good?
No, I'm good. She put it well.
Okay, awesome. Dr. Burton, tell us, why did you want to come on the Black Executive Perspective podcast to talk about this topic?
Well, you invited me, Tony.
That definitely has to have something to do with it, all right?
Could not be here. Could be here. B, November is National Adoption Awareness Month. And so I always like to do some type of programming around that leading up to it. And so October is an important time. And I know that November, we have a big election coming up. So there's probably going to be less adoption programming this month, coming month, because of that. So I wanted to make sure that I came on and let people know that adoption is a fantastic option. It is something that is needed, especially if you're talking about children, African-American children. And if you're thinking about the foster care system, they're great people like the Hendersons here who are doing amazing work within that system. There's a lot that needs to be done. And there are a lot of kids who actually need help. They need support. They need positive home environment. They need loving and nurturing and kind parents, people who have empathy, people who are going to be nice to them. And so I think it's important to come on to really talk about these issues and to really impart the importance of considering adoption if you are healthy, if you are happy, and if you're financially able. Then I think, and mentally stable, and mentally stable. And I'm not talking about like anxiety, depression, all the stuff that everybody has. I'm not talking about that, but mentally emotionally whole,
Right.
whole. Then I think you should really consider having a child.
Well, listen,
Adopting a child.
Adopting a child. Well, listen, number one, I thank you for again participating to share your stories. And so you guys ready? It seems like everybody's chomping at the bit. You guys ready to talk about it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right,
let's get into it.
So let's talk about it, right? So I'm going to start with the Hendersons first. Listen, and you said a little bit of it, but I'd love to dive in a little bit deeper. What inspired both of you to pursue adoption? All right. And then more importantly, how did you know it was the right path for what you guys wanted to do as a family?
Okay, I can start. And then Laura, you can add, certainly, if I miss things. I think, when we decided we wanted to start a family, we both had kind of experiences from our upbringing that had exposed us a little bit to foster care, to adoption. My mom, when I moved out and went to college, I was the oldest of 4 kids, and my mom fostered and adopted 2 more kiddos through foster care after I moved out, once I was out of the home. So I wasn't living at home when that happened, but obviously that's happening within my family. I was very much kind of aware of the process, and it really felt like something to me that was like, oh, this is a way we could build a family. And for Laura, she had exposure to that through her dad working in family court, and kind of having that experience through the legal system and being aware of kind of how those things go from that lens, which I'm sure she can talk about a little bit more. But for both of us, it was one way that we could imagine starting a family, and it's just what we decided to go for. And like you said earlier, once we decide to do something, we do it all the way. And so, we've gone from, initially starting out with 2 kiddos in our home and kind of having a number of kids come through our home, some of them to reunify with family, some of them still with us. Our daughter who's been with us the longest. We met her and she moved in with us in 2018 when she was 3, and she's 10 now. And so, we both had that kind of exposure early on, and I think we decided this was the route we wanted to go. We also had a friend who works in mental health with kids in foster care specifically, and with families in foster care, and knew us and said, I think you guys could be really great for this. I think you could be a good fit. It's hard, but it's worth it, and we need awesome foster parents. And so we decided to check it out, and now it's kind of, for me, it's like my central life's work at this point. And I'd say for Laura in a big way too. It's kind of, she always says it's the best thing we feel like we could be doing with our time and energy is loving on our kids.
That is awesome. I love it. I love it. And what I'm hearing, there was some familiarity in terms of, because as you were saying, Aubree, your mother had taken in a couple of kids, right? And then Laura, your father, from a court standpoint, from a legal standpoint, you understand the process, and so this wasn't like unfamiliar,
Right.
in terms of like, we don't know what to do or what the case may be. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we kind of knew a little bit about the system, and we knew more about kind of the background of the kids, right? And I think a lot of people, when they're thinking about adopting through foster care, there's like some fear that pops up, like, what if these kids are not okay or whatever? And I got to tell you, like, the kids are the best part. The kids are the joy. It's the adult grown-up stuff of foster care that's the worst and emotionally hard and all of that. But the kids are the bright light. And I think, we both were able to see that, whatever the stigma might be about kids who need help or in care, every kid just wants to be loved. Every kid just wants to be seen.
Right.
And there is this need out there in a very broken system that, targets and polices certain communities for folks who want to show up just to be there to lift others up and to be supportive of biological families as a whole, not just the kids. So we both felt like that's something we could do, and we could make kind of a life calling. And it's been a joy. It's been awesome. Yeah.
That is great. That is great. Dr. Burton, as you stated earlier, only parent, right? What inspired you to, go ahead? Because as you said earlier, I think it was 6 hours old when you had your daughter. Is that correct? So tell us a little bit about your story. What inspired you to go ahead and go into this route?
Yeah, so I have a grandfather who was adopted, and then on my dad's side, and then on my mom's side, we have other folks who are adopted on that side of the family. So I'd always been around. My family was always diverse in that way, and so everybody was treated the same. There was no really differentiation. You just kind of learned over the years that those folks were adopted, but they were always our family. So I always thought in my head I would adopt. I also thought I would get married and have children, but I never got married, and I never met anybody I wanted to have children with. Um, which is not sad. Some people, when I say it, they're like, "Oh," I'm like, "No, really, it's okay. It's okay. Life is good. It's actually fantastic.
That's right.
It's very
I love
stress
it.
free. Very stress free. Um, in that way. And so I decided once I got to a certain age that And one of my girlfriends, I have to say this. Actually, a bunch of my girlfriends have adopted, but one of my girlfriends I'm really tight with. She was telling me, "Do you want to be a young mama or do you want to be an old mama?" Which I think is funny because I'm 51 now, so I'm an old mama, which cracks me up. So she kept telling me, like, through the 30s, girl, you better do it. You know they cut you off, girl. You better do it because she had already done. Girl, you better do it. You know they cut you off. Then ain't nobody gonna want you to raise your old, old ass to raise this their young kids. You better do something. You better pull the trigger. So finally, I was
Oh,
like, okay, I'm 43. I guess I
she wore
better.
you down, huh?
She wore me out. 'Cause I was enjoying life, traveling all over the world, just having a great time. And I was like,
Right.
okay. And not that, having kids, you can't enjoy life. It just makes your life different. And you still enjoy it.
Right,
Hmm.
So, anyway, I decided to pull the trigger. I had two fall through. And then, and what's interesting, people always tell you when you're adopting, whoever your baby is, you'll know. The person you're supposed to be with or who's supposed to be with you, they'll show up. They'll be yours. And that is very true. Because my daughter and I, people, they are like, you all look alike, you sound alike, you feel alike, all the things. But she really is the person I was supposed to be with. So she was born. Actually, I wasn't even. I'd been here as a visiting professor in Atlanta, and then I was going back to Baltimore because I was living in Baltimore between the two places. And then, long story short, her mother found me through this kind of like adoption network, sort of, and the rest is history. I drove through rain, sleet, and snow to get her. She was born down here, and we've been together. I mean, for since she was literally 6 hours old.
that
So
is
Wow.
awesome.
that's what prompted me. I always wanted to be a mom. I didn't know if I wanted to be a wife, but I knew I wanted to be a mom. So adoption was the
And,
best option for me.
and I'm hearing a theme because same thing you as Aubree and Laura stated. You had in your family there was familiarity in terms of adoption, right?
Hmm.
So tip and again, I don't know, so it's just interesting to hear that you all three of you from one way or another, from a family standpoint, there was some familiarity in terms of adoption. So it didn't make it like daunting, or it probably was daunting, which we'll dive into, but it wasn't like just, I don't know if I would want to do that or whatever the case may be, because you've seen it in your family, either from a personal standpoint or even from a legal standpoint, right? So let me ask you this, and Laura, I'll go to you on this. What's a misconception, the common misconception that people think about adoption?
Uh, well, I think it's funny what Dr. Burton was just saying about like the kids look like you, they act like you, it's not my genes, but it is my attitude that's coming out of them. So um, they are little mirrors and they are my kids, whether they, look like me or not, you can tell who's raising them. And there's joy, like there's not a difference whether we've had a kid in our home for 6 years or 6 months. Like, if you let yourself fall in love with this kid, you're gonna bond with them, whether they're, you
Right.
know, difficult to parent for whatever reason. That's a thing they categorize in foster care. Is it difficult to raise kid because of different um, factors in their life and their story? And we've had some of those, and we are just as much in love with them as any other kid we've had in our home. So uh, we've had a kid from 4 days old, and then we had a kid move in at 9 years old, and we love them just as
Wow.
much. So that if you open up your heart, it's gonna happen. You're gonna fall in love with them, and then they'll scare you by mirroring you in ways that you wish you didn't have to see.
It's time to rethink your protein. Labs protein bars are crafted with high quality protein, double the leucine, and enriched branch chain amino acids, essential for optimal muscle recovery. There's finally a protein bar that works as hard as you do. So visit AdraLabs.com and use the code BEP to get 20% off. That's AdraLabs.com, promo code BEP.
Uh-huh.
Right, right. I mean, that's an excellent point though, right? Because, at the end of the day, And if you think about even biological parents, yes, there's going to be some similarities in terms of looks, but also from an attitude standpoint, the way you bring your kids up is a major influence in terms of how they act or even how they think. All right, and maybe even think like you, right, because of the way that you've been bringing them up and teaching them certain things. So those things are very important. Let's dive into the process a little bit. So Dr. Burton, I'm going to go to you on this. Single parent, your friend finally wore you down. You better do this, girl. You better do it. All right. And you find,
Yes, Jayla.
you know what I'm
Jayla
saying? All
Anderson
right,
Moore.
I'll
Yes.
do it. I'll do it. All right. you know, being single, like what were some of the most significant challenges? And during the process that you ran into, and also what was some of the assumptions that people thought that since you're going to be single, all right, that you can't do this or this is going to be too much for you. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Oh, Tony, you're going back to where we were yesterday. I said that good old racism, sexism, heterosexism, all the stuff, all the isms. Yeah, there is a lot of discrimination against single parents in general in adoption. I would say Black women. I mean, you can Google it, and not like conspiracy theorist stuff, but like factual data exists about the discrimination that LGBTQIA plus populations face in the adoption process. So one of the challenges I had was being a single person. Many people who are making decisions, and this is something that people don't understand. The mother, the parent of the biological parent is the one who makes the choice, who says yes to the actual adoptive parent. So it's really what they want. Like you can say, "Oh, I want a child. I want to have blue eyes. I want to have this." You can have all of those things in your head or whatever. Ultimately, the biological parent is making the decision about who and where their baby's going to go. All right. And so I didn't know that. I think a lot of people don't know that because you're just, you're thinking, oh, okay, well, I'm adopting a baby. So, of course, what I want might matter.
Like
And there are
going to
some.
a store, picking somebody out, right? That's
Right,
the
right,
thought
right.
process that people think, right?
Right. It's not that, it's a lot. Like you do get to say some things like, some kind of medical issues that, are you able to deal with? Some of that can be quite expensive, things of that nature. But as a whole, like you really don't have too much say in it. And honestly, all I said was healthy. I didn't care about gender. I didn't care about anything other than, a couple of different categories. Smart. I said, please, intelligent. I didn't know I was going to get a newborn. I didn't know, but whatever.
Right.
Those are kind of like my wish list because I'm a PhD, a professor and stuff. So I'm around academics and stuff. But my point is, they make the decision. But what's interesting is when you're a single parent, a lot of times you lose out to two parent households. A lot of people who are making these decisions usually come from disenfranchised and vulnerable situations. And so they assume, and this is an assumption, that if you have two parents and if you have two incomes, then the child's life is going to be better. And that's I won't say it's an incorrect assumption, but it is an assumption, right? Um, so when you are a single parent, especially as a Black woman, with all the stereotypes around being a Black woman and single Black women, many of them are negative and socially constructed. They're not really rooted in anything real. You have to deal with that too. So it's like, do I want this single Black woman? Do I want my child raised by a single Black woman, even if I was financially able to do it,
Didn't matter.
even
It
if I
didn't
had
matter. Yeah.
all the things around? So you have that kind of issue that you face. And then I think one of the adoption agencies that I ended up not going with was discriminatory in the sense that she kept asking me like, how are you gonna, because this at the time I was doing it, I was very high profile. I was a editor at large for a major online news publication. I had a column in a major online, I was very high profile. And so she kept asking me, well, how are you going to do this? Like, how you don't have time to do this. Just very kind of projecting kind of these old school ideas onto me. I wasn't married. I have a high profile, demanding job. How on earth was I going to be able to raise this child? Something that they wouldn't well, maybe they do, but I didn't see them asking um, two-parent households, like, both of you work full time, so how are you gonna make time to take
Right,
care of this
right,
child,
Yeah.
right, right,
or what
right, right,
have
right,
you? So it's
right.
different things like that. It's not only race; it's also gender. I would imagine I'm straight, but I imagine it's sexuality, because people also assume if you're single and you're adopting that you're gay.
Yeah.
Because I got a lot of that as well, like people asking me about my sexual identity, and as well as my gender identity. My hair was different then, and people are stereotypically motivated,
Hmm.
so they were asking me these dumbass questions. Excuse my language, I cuss a little bit.
No, it's
And
okay.
so all of that was, I did not expect or anticipate any of that, or not any of it, but I just was surprised that people cared so much about socially constructed ideas that really don't matter at the end of the day in terms of having a healthy and happy and well-raised child, you know?
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah, so those are some of the things you deal
Yeah.
with.
Aubree, let me turn it towards you. Same question. All right, same sex couple. What was some of the legal barriers that you guys encountered? And as Dr. Burton talked about the sexism, racism, all the different things that she did. I'd love to hear from you guys as well. And Laura, jump in when you can.
Yeah. I mean, so for us, it's a little different since we went the foster care route. You become certified as a foster parent with an agency. Our agency is New Alternatives for Children, which I'll shout them out a bunch because we love them. If you're in New York City and you're considering fostering, you should check them out for sure. But, for us, and for most foster parents, to my understanding, it's a process where you go through a certification. Ours was pretty fast, but took like 6 months. You take classes, do a lot of the same home study type stuff that you do when you're doing adoption. So you have somebody come and like, look through your home, make sure it's safe. You have all these safety regulations you have to, put in place. You have to submit your household budget, so they can, know that you make enough money to support a child or that you have a source of income somehow. There's a lot of kind of those hoops that you have to jump through to sort of like prove yourself that you can be a suitable parent, that I know our friends who have gone the adoption route have described similar things. But for
Mm-hmm.
us, what's interesting is once you are certified and licensed, then it becomes actually in foster care more of a process of being able to field the requests for kids to come into your home, because you start getting calls of, hey, this child needs a home. And for us, it's the foster care agency who's making the decisions about which home could be a good fit. So it's actually not, the biological parents have no say whatsoever, in at least in the case of our
Mm-hmm.
agency, is my understanding, it's a totally opposite side of the spectrum that I actually in many ways think is problematic. It's the child welfare system is one that also disempowers families who are involved with it from the biological family side. And so there's that piece. But so, and our agency also takes a big stance on, and I believe the state of New York takes a big stance on being supportive of queer families and queer foster parents and queer foster children, and ensuring that there's not discrimination that happens, and they have sort of systems and structures in place around that. So our experience from that lens has been really good. We actually, have had meetings with biological parents, where there has been like an advocate from the foster agency there on our behalf to support us in that space in case something homophobic was said, right? Um,
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but also, I think like nothing that I say can be taken away. It's always filtered through a lens of our whiteness, right? Laura and I show up looking very much and behaving very much, and also having the background of a lot of the people who work at the foster care agency. We have a
Mm.
ton in common with all of our caseworkers, right? Are people we could have gone to grad school with. And there's a sort of way that we're privileged, I think, in some ways. And I think a lot of it is unconscious, but that is
Mm-hmm.
something where I can't speak to whether Dr. Burton would have had that same experience that we had, being a foster parent and feeling that level of supported. So that's just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, Laura, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I was
Go
just
ahead,
going to say,
Laura.
I
Go
was
ahead.
going to underline what she said about us living in New York State, that takes some of these things about discrimination very seriously. And what's sad in our country is that, adoption, foster care, these are systems that are used as political tools. And in certain states with, conservative leadership, or where, fundamentalist religious organizations have strongholds, like, the legal landscape and the approach is very different. And it's really important when you're thinking about, whether it's foster care or adoption, researching the agency that you're going to work with and understanding who funds them and how they're supported and what they believe philosophically, because that will change your experience, whether,
Yes.
you're a person of color, whether you're a queer person. Like, you see it in the news about lawsuits over who gets to be a parent and all of that. And unfortunately, that's just baked into our political culture and this experience of parenting.
Let me and Dr. Bird, I want to come to you because I'm going to ask you a similar question, but I just want to make sure I'm clear what I heard. What you said, Aubree, is that at the end of the day, you guys are a same-sex couple, right? But what I was hearing is that, and again, it's foster care, so it's a little bit different than adoption. But what I was hearing is that because you're two white people, at the end of the day, the biases, the privilege of being white doesn't really affect or causes an issue in terms of same sex or anything like that. Is that what I'm hearing, basically?
I think it's that for me, our whiteness has played more of a distinctive role in our experience than our queerness has, I think is what I'm saying.
That's okay. And so I heard it correctly.
Yes.
Exactly. That's what I thought. Right. That's what. Okay. Interesting. Dr. Burton, same question. Do you feel race? And I think you spoke a little bit about it earlier, but you said gender and stuff like that. Do you feel race in the process affected you in any way throughout the process when you're adopting your daughter?
Oh yeah, I mean, from the adoption fairs, when you first get there, and they have a list of kids, and they have them categorized by race, and then they got the black kids at the bottom, and they have the cheapest amount next to them.
Yep.
When
I
you
was
say
like,
cheapest amount, what do you
it
mean
looks
by
like
that?
a slave trade, like those old slave documents that you see where they have people and they have their eyes and their teeth and their whatever, and then they tell how much they cost. In adoption fairs, some of that still happens, and so they'll have a
Wow.
list of kids. It won't be the actual kids, but say a white newborn or whatever. This is how much it will cost you. Whatever, Latin X, biracial, such and such or whatever. The black kids are always at the bottom, and they're always the cheapest.
For real?
So it starts there. That was the first time where I was just like, I can't do this. I can't be a part of this system.
Yep.
Yeah, because then it seems like so. Hold on, let's.
I'm
Let's stop.
laughing, but
Hold on.
it's nervous laughter.
Yeah.
It's not
Well,
funny.
hold on.
Ha. But yeah.
Yeah. Let me just hold on. Let's just put a pin here because I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So what I'm hearing, you finally, I want to love a child. I want to bring love and put a child in a beautiful family and help nurture and bring them up. And then when you start looking to go through the process, you get a menu.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm kind of, simplifying it. You get a menu of white and dollar signs, okay? And then all the way down at the bottom of the menu, or even if it's in the middle, it doesn't really matter. But the black is, and it's the cheapest.
Yes.
So this is the adoption system. I'm a little befuddled and shocked by that. That's
what
I mean,
was
so
gonna say.
how do you get back to you? I cut you off because I'm a little shocked. How do you even go back to the love part? Because right off the bat, you coming in loving, but then you see that, wait a minute, and then so now even the person that you do adopt is a devalue system on that individual based on their race right off the bat.
Right. And then I think that it's, being a member of a historically disenfranchised group, one of the things that people don't give us credit for is our ability to navigate systems that are set up against us. And so because we're able to continue through the process because we've been living life. This is what we do. We continue through the process despite or in spite of,
Right.
because we have to
Right.
get these things that we need in order to live the lives that we want to have, right? And so the
Right.
same thing is adoption is not different from that. Like when you see that, just like, oh my God, how could I be a part of the
Here
system?
we go
But
again. Yeah.
here we go. And then you ask the questions, you write the letters, you raise the hell, but you keep moving, right? The woman who did my home study, who was loved, I loved her a lot until I saw the final home study. And she wrote about me in a way. I was like, is this a plantation movie? Like, what are you doing? Like, I literally
So
made her rewrite it. I said, who is this? When she
so
described
what
me,
was how did she frame you? What was the narrative high
she
level?
described me as a mammy. Like, so she was like, she's this heavy set, um, uh, kind of like quiet. I wish my dogs would be quiet right now. Quiet. Um, uh, and I had another dog, Ming, rest in peace back then. And I love Ming. That was my first dog. Like I had as an adult. So I just treated her like my just little thing. And, the way she described me, it was like the behavioral and physical characteristics reflected that of,
Gone
are
with
they
the
killing?
wind in a way.
Are they killing each other? Yeah, yeah.
So
I
it's
was
like
like,
gone.
okay, yeah. So, yeah, it reflected each other. It reflected that, and I think I was hyper aware of it, obviously, because I'm a media scholar and I teach those things, right? So I'm looking at it, and I was just like, "Who is this?" And she's like, "Well, what do you mean?" And it was on the first page. I said, "If you write this way, no one is going to pick me because I sound like I'm trapped in a plantation movie from the last century." So I made her write it over. And I gave her suggested language. And I told you she was a lovely lady in many ways. I think that sometimes how people perceive us relatively, as opposed to who we really are, they just don't see you. So she saw the nice house, she saw the professor, she saw the things, but she didn't see me, right?
Right.
And she came to my house like 3 times or what have you. Hold on, I'm gonna tell my dogs to shut up.
Wow. Wow. So I mean, so let me. I just
Yeah.
want to. So let me. What's you ladies' thoughts on what you just heard, Dr. Burton? And obviously, it's different because you guys are in the foster care system. But what's your thoughts on that?
I think it's like sadly that it doesn't surprise me or shock me necessarily. It's horrifying, of course. I think it aligns a lot with, we have a close friend who's a Black woman and would be an only parent who, has had kind of a like similarly challenging, really crappy time with kind of that process of becoming, like, going through the adoption agency and jumping through all the hoops and having the home studies and that sort of experience. And so it aligns with a lot of what we've heard her share and what I've read Black adoptive parents share specifically, and is I also hear that, and I just think that could not be more different from the experience that we had. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think white privilege is a big component of it. I think, like,
Right.
there are many ways that, like, we feel like, oh, we couldn't have been facilitated through the process any faster. Right. And some of that potentially is because it's foster care and there's a need for foster parents and all of that.
Right.
But I think it would be foolish to say that there's no role that our race plays in that.
Did you guys, Laura? This is for you. Did you guys? Did you feel any discrimination, even in the foster care platform, because you guys are same sex, or was there anything in that you felt like a regular couple wouldn't have to deal with, this regular heterosexual couple wouldn't deal with?
Well, in our process of being licensed and certified as foster parents, we did not experience that, but a lot of that is because of New York State and some of the laws around anti-discrimination that we're benefiting from here. But, in New York, the discrimination that we have is more, um, it's more under the layers, right? It's covered under the rug a little bit with neighborhood segregation and other things that are happening here, and that most kids in care are Black here, or, and most foster parents here are, in our experience, I actually don't know the data on this, but in our experience, a lot of the other foster parents are like grandparents age. It's a lot of Caribbean grandmothers who raise their kids and they want to raise another generation of kids, so they get into it. So we benefit by being somewhat different than your average foster parent here. But that's sad to me, because that um, way of understanding families and of being an elder in your community and continuing to care for kids is a model that we would like to follow as parents. I mean, and that is not
Right.
something necessarily that is from white culture, but it's something that we're learning from other cultures and see the value of generational love and care. So we see that, the other folks get treated differently by the system itself, or by the admins of the system. But the thing we have actually experienced is that bio parents are very hesitant about us at times as queer parents,
Mm-hmm.
and bio parents in New York want to have, a mom and a dad for their kid, or but once they get to know us and they see that we really love the kids and their kids are treated well and safe, that we move past that very quickly. But we have had some funny, awkward conversations about sexuality with our kids' parents, and it's been very respectful, and we've built ties with them. But that has been a thing that we've learned a lot from.
Number one, thank you for sharing that. Let me ask you this. And I know it's different. Then I'm going to go to you, Dr. Burton. So in terms, you have 4 kids, right? Different ratio makeup. How do you, and then look, I get it that they're coming maybe out of a situation that's not that great. How do you talk about we're family?
If you like what you hear and want to join us on this journey of making uncomfortable conversations comfortable, please subscribe to a Black Executive Perspective podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe now to stay connected for more episodes that challenge, inspire, and lead the change.
How do you, nobody looks like one another, right? You guys same sex. Talk about how you create that love and because they go to school, let's be fair, right? And they're loving you guys and they see you mom and this. So talk a little bit about the conversations that you have with the kids, right? To reinforce that this is a family. This is no different than any other family. Love and stuff to that nature. I'd love to hear you guys' feedback on that.
Yeah. I love this question. I think, we spend a lot of time and energy on this. I think a big part of it for me, and this is how I think about foster parenting in general, is that we very much view ourselves as therapeutic parents, right? It's above and beyond. I think when it's a different experience than when somebody gives birth to a child and has that child, has that connection from the beginning. And not to say that type of parenthood is not without its challenges. It certainly is. But I think there is a way that we try to be intentional about being therapeutic. And it's very much in the same way that if someone attended a support group, you begin to feel a kinship with the people in that support group, even if you've all come from different backgrounds, because you are coming together to a supportive healing space. And that's what I really want our home to be like. And that's what it ends up feeling like, I think, for our kids from what they've shared. A lot of that comes from creating shared traditions together, right? We have, for a long time, we did Pizza Friday in our house, where every Friday we would order pizza. And something like that feels really simple, I think, but it's something that the kids connect to and they say, oh, this is our shared tradition as our family, right? We have many things like that where it's about saying, okay, we're operating as a unit, right? It's also about how we frame ourselves as their caregivers, right? It's that, they don't have to call us mom ever if they don't want to. They can call us by our first names. That's fine. Most of them eventually transition to wanting to call us mom, usually I think because they hear the other kids call us mom. But that's a big milestone. We just had that with one of our kids today. I dropped him off at school and he pointed to me and this is a kid who normally I drop him off at school and he cannot get me out the door fast enough, does not want to say bye. And he pointed to me talking to his friend and said, that's my mom. And that's like a huge milestone in foster care and an adoption, right? Is that moment of like,
Yes.
oh, this child believes this and will go into a social environment where kids are relentlessly picked on. I mean, like,
Correct.
kids are mean to each other at times. And so our kids, they get picked on, right? Our oldest son, he's 13. He's a young Black man. His kids, or his classmates, kids in his class, see us and are like, you have two moms and they're white moms. Like, are you kidding me? Right. And he feels a lot of embarrassment around that. But I think for us, we don't shy away from that. We want to talk to him about that. We want to draw that out. We want to say, what can we do to support you? We get what it feels like to feel different. We understand that in our own ways. We want to support you. And so it's a big part of it is also about not shying away from what's hard, right? Not pretending that the difficult stuff isn't there, not pretending that they didn't all have a traumatic event that caused them to be removed from their biological family and maybe cycle through multiple foster homes, right? But acknowledging that and saying, like, it's okay to feel all the things that you feel about that. You're safe here.
That is awesome. And Laura, I want to see if you want to add anything too, but Aubree, I got a follow-up question real quickly. So today, was it today when you dropped him off at school? And he said, this is my mother. Okay. How did that make you feel?
Oh, there's no better feeling. I walked out of the school and I texted Laura immediately, like, oh my God, you're never going to believe this, right? Because you also just see the trajectory for kids, right? They go from, often kids especially kids who have come from foster care, but also kids from adoption, right? There's trauma that is just inherent in that you're not, and that's true whether you adopt a child as the moment they're born or 10 years in, right? They're being separated from your biological family is a traumatic event. And so for our kids, there's a process where they're going to protect themselves by being prickly, by pushing you away, by saying some of just, I mean, we've heard some of the meanest stuff from our kids, but we know at the end of the day that they're testing to see if we'll stick around, right? That's what it is. And
so true. It is so true.
So there's that feeling of like, oh my God, he believes that I'm going to keep dropping him off at school and every day saying, hey, I love you. Have a good day. Even if he doesn't say it back, it's not conditional on him saying it back. Right. And so there's something really deeply rewarding and like nourishing and healing for me as a parent to really feel that, like, oh, he believed it.
That is awesome. Laura, anything you want to add?
I would just say, like, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not us versus the biological parents, right? So our kids will always miss and long for their moms, their bio moms. And as some of them we have a relationship with and we see them all the time, or we have, structured court mandated visits with, right? So some of them see their families all the time. And our kids who don't grieve that all the time, and it comes up all the time, and it's not, that doesn't hurt me. That doesn't mean they love me less. That means they wish desperately that we all could be together in one happy family. Like one of our kids used to ask, like, can my mom just move in with us? Like, why can't she live here too? And I think some of that is a recognition in like child eyes, like my mom needs safety and love too. So what I'm getting, she needs. And so this is about, like, foster care and adoption is about expanding families, not, it should not be about separating or keeping away from certain members of the family.
That's right.
You guys going to make me cry on this show here, right? I'm trying not to, okay? But this is beautiful. Dr. Burton, talk a little bit about, the conversation or the communication that you have with your daughter in terms of family. And, did you tell her she was adopted? I would love to hear that.
Oh, yeah. I told her, Kai is very bright. And I told her from the very beginning that, because they come home and they talk about, oh, mommy, when I was in your belly, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so I said, no, some babies grow in their mommy's bellies, other babies grow in their mommy's hearts, right? And so that's how we started the conversation. And I've always told her that she was adopted. Her biological mom wanted a closed adoption, but I pushed for an open. adoption, because I just feel like kids need to know where they come from,
Yep.
where they got their face from. You also want to know medical history, because
Yep.
in the adoption process, they do ask, but they only go back to, like, they'll ask about the parents and the grandparents, but they don't ask about aunts and uncles and all that kind of stuff. And so I just thought it was just a better idea to at least be able to contact her, which was great because because I pushed for it, we're actually great friends now. And uh, we share time and space together and all the things. And we have phone calls and FaceTime calls and all the things like that too. Um, and so when I talk to my daughter, you want to do it when it's age appropriate. Like, you have to use age appropriate language and what have you. But she knows I'm mom, and I love her unconditionally. She loves me unconditionally. It's just us, so we're super tight. It's funny because we have such a strong bond, that even other people can see. And so I think I'm very blessed in that way, because I know even people who have biological children sometimes don't bond with them ever, and sometimes not for years at a time or what have you. But we
Right.
just always had it. She just came to me, and she's been with me ever since. So, we talk very transparently. Her brother, she has a biological brother who's born after her. My friends adopted him. So when you talk about
Wow.
expanding families, Laura, you are not, like, it is true. So now we have this, what we call it, the kumbaya effect, where we're all together. They're 10 minutes from me. We do some holidays together. We have play dates. We're in the same Jack and Jill group, chapter, all the things we just kind of do together to make sure that we keep them together, even though they live in separate households, right? So it's just about honesty, transparency, and making sure that the language that you use is age appropriate. And never, I never want her. Her mother, biological mother, gave me the greatest gift I've ever had.
Mhm.
So I never want her to think poorly of her, because I also understand that she'll also think poorly of herself, because that's how
Mm.
our psychology works.
Yep.
And so I always try to uplift, inspire, and make sure that we have positive interactions at all times.
That is, I mean, again, you guys gonna push me over the top in terms of tears in a minute, right? I was trying to hold back, and then Dr. Burton, oh my God, what I'm learning, and I'm going to your specific journey, Dr. Burton. When you said that she wanted a closed adoption, and you pushed for an open adoption, right? And the good news is luckily you did, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and what we think we want or we would never do one day, we end up changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard stories of people who had closed adoptions, but then later on they want to find their biological kids, right? And then the parent agreed to that, the adopted parent, and now it's an issue, because now they might not have told them that they were adopted because it was a closed thing. And now this opens up a whole can of worms, right? And so I love the way you really push for that. But more importantly, I love from all of you guys about the transparency, the communication, being intentional, as you were saying, Laura and Aubree, about dealing with these issues that come up and not running from them. Because a lot of times when we try to hide, and I don't want to use the word hide, but when we try to, deflect or don't bring up certain things or don't deal with them, any type of confrontation right off the bat, it only gets bigger, right? And it turns into something that could have been handled from the get-go. So the question I have for you guys as we get ready to close, I want to hear from each of you, because I think Dr. Burton, you said yesterday, 400,000 kids that are waiting to be adopted. I think is that correct, or something of that
Half a
nature?
million.
I
Half a
believe
million.
only 10% of kids end up, 500,000. Only 10% of kids end up getting adopted. When you break down the racial barriers, it becomes even smaller than that, based on for people of color. The foster home mechanism is insane. There's a ton of kids that are in foster home because parents for whatever reason, and back to your initial point, Dr. Burton, where you were like, look, I didn't want a husband, but I knew I wanted a baby, right? And there's people who have babies and then end up don't wanting them, okay? Or they can barely take care of themselves, and then they end up having children and they can't take care of the children, right? And so I would love for you guys to tell the audience why, from an adoption standpoint, from a foster home standpoint, what advice would you give them, and why this could be a great alternative for them, regardless if they have biological kids or regardless if they want to, they don't have kids. I'll start with you first, Laura.
I mean, the easy answer is there's no greater joy. I mean, I'm corny when it comes to this about why you should foster or adopt. Fall in love with a human being who's not your kin, who's not your blood, and make them your blood and kin is a heart expanding project, and it has so much joy. And we often get asked, I have other kids. Is it going to be okay if we foster or adopt? And our answer is yes. And show them, model for them that experience too, that our family can add to us in this way, and can grow in love. So it's the best experience. That's the easy, short answer.
Awesome. Dr. Burton.
Yeah. I I think I want to say two things I didn't say before for people who are thinking about adopting. One of which is that there is a cutoff sometimes at age 50. So you really said, I was joking about her pushing me along or whatever, but for adoption agencies, at 50 is the cutoff in the United States typically when they won't let you adopt anymore. And you also have to go through health screenings to make sure that you're going to be around to actually take care of the child. And then you have to have a will and a succession plan if anything happens to you. So do know that those three things have to be in place in order for you to adopt. But what I will say for Black people, we've been doing this our whole lives, especially in this country. Actually, before we got here, but certainly in this country, taking in children
So
that
true.
we were
So
separated
true.
from, whether we talk about slavery, whether we talk about, Jim Crow laws and people being incarcerated unjustly. And, you got a whole family that has to be taken care of, whether you talk about people losing a home to a fire at a time when Black people couldn't get insurance, which people don't talk about those things we couldn't get. And so there's no way to replace the home until you can afford to buy another one or build another one, and taking in whole families for that. So we've been doing this work our entire lives. So we are actually ready to be foster parents, ready to be adopted parents, because we take kids in all the time. That is part of our culture. And it doesn't matter. Just like Laura, I think it was Laura who said it. Caribbean folk, African folk, anywhere from the continent of Africa, any country, pick one. The United States, the UK, we do this all over the world. It is part of who we are as a people. So don't think of it as something different, and don't map white patriarchal biblical constructions onto your life. This is who we are. This is what we do. And we should not let that be defined by these other, and I hate the other people, but by these systems of power that make us go against who we are and what we do. And so I say this to you, we do this anyway. Why not? If you can afford it, again, if you
Right.
are mentally and physically healthy, if you are full of love and kindness and patience and compassion and empathy, adopt a child, foster a child, and help children out. I have a friend now. Her son's girlfriend is in an orphanage, in an orphanage, and so she's helping her go to college. She's helping her have a place to stay when she ages out. A lot of kids age out of the system. You can help them then if you can't help them now. Give them a place to stay. I know in the AUC they have um, a program where kids who have aged out of the system and they don't have places to go during the holidays, where they can come and be together and be with families during the holidays. So there are different ways that you can help, and different ways that you can be a part of these systems, or to meet these needs, where you don't have to necessarily become a foster parent per se, or an adoptive parent. But there are ways that you can support children through the different stages of their lives. So just kind of think creatively about it as well, particularly because we're already doing this work.
Right, right. Aubree, you get the last word.
Yeah, I think I love so much of what's been said. I think I would just add, from a queer perspective, like Laura was saying earlier, there is just something so special and so meaningful about this expansive idea of family and of chosen family that I think is part of what makes, we all sort of have had a different exposure to it where, adoption, foster care are like part of our normal maps for how family is created. But I think even if you're entering into it from a place where you haven't been exposed to that, you haven't experienced that, just inviting people into a space where you think more expansively about what family means to you, right? What it means to have a family and to create a family. And I think, I grew up Dr. Burton also as the child of an only parent, and who was, as I described, was always kind of taking in people who needed to be taken in, whether that was literally come live with us, whether that was just come be safe in our home. And I like the idea that that I'm continuing that in my family and in the way I'm creating my family now. And I know that my kids are going to grow up to have a similar outlook and view because of what they have experienced being a part of our family. And so I think to me, it is rejecting that sort of like white, hetero, patriarchal conception of like the nuclear family that, can only look a certain way. And I think as queer people too, like we know a lot of us get ejected from our families because of who we are. And, that's not what's happened for any of our children, but you know what that pain is as a queer person, to be rejected in that way or to be separate from your family and to, be able to provide care and to provide love and safety for kids is really, there's nothing like it.
That is awesome. So listen, I said I got one final question. I'm going to ask you guys a question. I want one word. I don't want nothing else. I want you to answer it with one word. Okay? Based on your experience, your journey, the ups, downs, good, bad, from adopting Dr. Burton to foster parenting from the Hendersons, what is the one word throughout that journey that you will say about it? I'll start with Laura first. One word.
Hope.
All right. Aubree.
Healing.
All right. Dr. Burton.
Resiliency.
Woo! I love it. Hope. Ooh, I love it. You guys just killed it. You killed it. I loved it. And you encapsulated in those one words this whole episode about adoption and foster care. So I want to thank you from the deep depths of my heart for you guys coming on a Black Executive Perspective podcast, sharing your journey, sharing your story, educating our audience on this topic. And I don't want you to go anywhere else because you guys are going to help us with our call to action. So I think it's now time for
Tony's Tidbit.
All right, so the tidbit today is this. Every adoption story is a tale of turning waiting into welcoming, challenges into cherishing. While adopting one child won't change the world, for that child, their entire world will change. And you heard a lot of that today from our fabulous guests. So I don't want you to forget this, to always check out every Thursday, Need to Know with Dr. Nsenga Burton. You don't want to miss it on the Black Executive Perspective podcast where Dr. Burton dives into timely and crucial topics that shape our community and our world. Tune in to gain unique insights and deepen your understanding of the issues that matter. Every Thursday on the Black Executive Perspective, Need to Know with Dr. Nsenga. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, Becoming Family, the Challenges and Triumphs of Adoptive Parenting. And so now, it's time for BEP's call to action. Our goal is to decrease all forms of discrimination, and we call that LESS, LESS, and our esteemed guests are going to help us with our call to action. Aubree.
So L is for learn or educate yourself on racial and cultural nuances. And the shout out I would give here is we've heard a lot from the perspective of adoptive and foster parents, which is awesome. I would encourage folks who want to learn more to seek out perspectives from adoptees, from people who have been adopted, who have been through that experience from that perspective. There's lots out there if you just search adoptee perspective. You'll find a lot, and sit with that. It can be really challenging, but I think that is really helpful.
E is for empathy. Empathy helps understand diverse perspectives. Empathy for me is about learning. It's about imagination. As we grow our ability to imagine what it's like in somebody else's shoes, we can be more kind, more caring, create a more generous world. So E is for empathy.
S is for share your insights and enlighten others. So, I mean, you've heard this podcast. You've gotten inside information that you may not have had before, you had access to. So make sure you share it with people. Make sure you share the positive. And I know I came with some of the negative, Tony. I didn't mean to shake you up.
I'm about to pull my handkerchief out.
But the reason is because we want to be transparent, and we want to make sure that you have as much information as possible in this limited amount of time to help you better understand fostering children and adopting children.
Absolutely. And then the final S is for stop. You want to stop discrimination as it walks in your path. So if Aunt Jenny says something at the Thanksgiving table that's inappropriate, you say, Aunt Jenny, we don't say that. We don't believe that. And you stop it immediately. So if everyone that's listening to a Black Executive Perspective podcast can incorporate less, LESS, will build a more fairer and more understanding world. And more importantly, we'll all be able to see the change that we want to see, because less will become more. So remember to catch the next episode of Black Executive Perspective Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us on our socials of LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Facebook, and Instagram at A Black Exec. For our fabulous guest, Dr. Nsenga Burton. For Laura and Aubree Henderson, who came with the magic and the love and the sharing today. I'm Tony Tidbit. We learned about it today. We talked about it. I love you. And guess what? We're out.
A Black Executive Perspective.